Hello, welcome to Dust Jackets, Conversations with Authors. I'm Maggie Lynch, and my guest today is children's author Sherrill Joseph. I first met Sherrill through the Authors Guild online forums. When I was starting to write my own middle grade books, I got to know her a little more as part of the middle grade writers section. We now meet once a month, a group of us via Zoom to share our progress, our ideas, and generally support each other. So let me just tell you a little bit about Sherrill to get us started. She's a retired K-12 literacy teacher. Her current work is the Botanic Hill Detective Mysteries series, written for children ages 9 to 14. Though I have to say some adults will enjoy these as well. She has garnered multiple awards for these books. I won't list them all, but among these awards are the Mom's Choice Book Awards, the Moonbeam Children's Book Awards, and a Reader's Favorite Book Award. I always love those Reader's Favorite one because you know you're reaching who you need to reach. She says she's been inspired by the children she taught, and she uses her writing to stay connected with kids who rock. I love that phrase. Her stories present responsible, role model children detective characters who provide readers with a fun mystery to solve and something to learn, while showing that being respectful and helpful citizens can be cool. She lives in San Diego, California, in a 1928 Spanish Mission revival bungalow. Her inspirations for her series include her historic neighborhood, the Nancy Drew mysteries she grew up reading, and her unique brain, which includes lexical, gustatory synesthesia. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So welcome, Sherrill. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Maggie. This is quite an honor. I really appreciate it.
So I have a few questions for you today, and we'll just kind of work through them, and feel free to just talk about whatever you want.
Okay.
So I know you were a teacher. Can you just talk about what grades you taught and how long you taught?
Okay. Well, I was a teacher in San Diego Unified School District for 35 years. I retired in 2013. During my career, I taught every grade K-12. I moved around a lot by choice. I just wanted to experience different schools, different socioeconomic groups, different colleagues, all of that, different subjects, different grades. But it turned out my very favorite grade was fifth. And so my last 10 years of my career, I got to teach fourth and fifth grade. And I loved it. So that was my teaching. And I love kids. And I think you have to when you're a teacher. It's a calling. You're not in it for the money. You're in it because you want to do something for children. And I probably learned more from them than they learned from me, however.
Wow. Well, I applaud you and all teachers.
I think I'm a kid at heart. I think I've always been a kid at heart. And so I kind of felt like I fit right in with them.
Well, that's great.
And I think I had more fun with them than I probably did with adults. So, it worked out for me.
Well, that's perfect for someone who's writing middle grade novels. And so can you just kind of talk about why you decided to start writing books for children, and particularly middle grade novels, as opposed to picture books, which a lot of teachers start with?
Okay. Yes. I fell in love with reading and writing when I was about fourth grade. And this is the book that did it right here.
Oh,
this is my Nancy Drew book. I have the entire collection behind me in my bookcases here, all copies, every copy. And this was actually one that I read as a kid. This was number 5, by the way, The Secret of Shadow Ranch. And when I was reading that book, I remember thinking, I want to write kids' mystery books someday.
Wow.
And so that was sort of the seed got planted when I was about 9 years old in 4th grade. And I never forgot that. But then, life happens and you go on and you have to make, get a real job.
Right.
So I got my teaching credential, which basically got to teach literacy most of my career. And I also did some curriculum editing. So I was pretty good at grammar and all of that. In fact, I branded myself a grammar nerd very proudly. Those were kind of some of the beginnings, but I also was inspired a couple of years before I retired in my classroom. One of my students one day said to me, when we were sitting around in a book club group, we were reading this one book that was, I'm not going to mention the title, but it was pretty awful. It was like a classic children's book redo. And the redo was not very good, and in my opinion, and in the children's opinion. And one of my students looked at me and said, "Miss J, you could write a better book than this."
Oh my gosh.
And that made me reach back to my 9-year-old self and pull forward that desire, that goal I had to write children's mystery books. And so right at that point, I started thinking about who my characters could be. And I knew my books would be fashioned after sort of Nancy Drew Hardy Boys kind of mysteries, because I wanted to write good, solid, clean books for kids that would teach them something, but also maybe be role models, provide role models for them. And so those were the origins of my books.
Wow. And so let me tackle it before I forget about it, that lexical gustatory synesthesia thing. Just saying it gets me tongue-tied. So could you explain to our listeners exactly what that means and how it impacts you as a person and inspires your writing?
Okay. Synesthesia is considered a mental ability, not a disability, interestingly enough. I suppose it can be a disability for some people, but I have what's called lexical gustatory synesthesia. Synesthesia is where you have extra connections or synapses in the brain across senses that aren't normally connected. So lexical gustatory, for example, means word to taste.
Wow.
And so when I hear or see or read certain words, I taste something. Sometimes it's like a full-on flavor in my mouth. Sometimes it's just a little glimmer of flavors in the back of my tongue. And sometimes I can even smell. I can smell the food or the taste.
Wow.
And I have always had this my whole life. I remember I have a twin sister, and I remember saying to her one time, "Sharon, your name makes me taste peaches."
Oh my
I
goodness.
said, do you get that? Do you have that? Do you ever have that happen? And she goes, "No, I don't have that." And she kind of looked at me strangely,
For sure.
But I just kind of assumed everybody, except maybe my twin, for some reason. I just thought everybody had that, or everybody did that. And I just kind of, I never thought much about it. I just kind of went forward. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I was on the internet and I ran across an article on synesthesia. And I thought, oh, I wonder what that is. And I started reading it, and like a light bulb went on. It's like, oh my gosh, that's me.
Oh yeah.
That's me. So I finally had a label to attach to this ability. And it is considered an extra sensory ability. And there are a lot of famous people who have it. For example, Van Gogh had synesthesia. Duke Ellington had synesthesia. Billie Eilish, who's a current kind of rock star, has synesthesia. So I guess I'm sort of in good company. I asked my mother if she had anything like that, and she said no. And I asked her if anybody in the family other than me ever talked about anything like this, and she said no. So I don't know where it came from. I like to think it came from, some great, 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 grandmother ancestor back then or something. But most people have a really common type, which you've probably heard of, which is where when you hear music, you see colors.
Yeah, I have heard of that one. And I was wondering
That's
if
the most
Billie
common.
Eilish
Yeah,
has that.
that's the most common type. But my type, lexical gustatory, is very rare. There's only something like 0.02% of the world have it. And
Wow.
so this type is very rare, whereas the other types are much more common. Maybe 2% of the world have, 2 to 4% of the world have that color sound type, or you see letters in color, you know. And when I said disability, sometimes for some people who are trying to read, that could be a problem for them. So in that case, it could maybe be a disability. But mine has done nothing but enhance my life. And I think it's made me more creative.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you find, are there certain words that the taste isn't very pleasant and so you avoid them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was dating this one guy years ago. Went out with him a couple times, and I finally had to tell him that I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore. He asked me why, and I said, because your name makes me taste something really gross.
Oh my gosh. I bet
Oh
no one's
my,
ever
he
had
thought
that turned down before.
yeah, he thought I was nuts. But it's very real for me, you know. And of
Sure.
course, when I do school visits, the first thing the kids want to do is ask me, what does my name make you taste, you know?
Oh,
So what I do is ahead of time, I get the class roster, and I write down what the kids' names make me taste. And some of them are not pleasant. And I'll say, I'm sorry, but your name makes me taste bad, you know. I'm sorry. But you know, I can't control it. It's just what it is what it is.
sure.
So anyway,
Sure.
and then I give that list to the teacher. So I say, your teacher already has the list. She'll let you know later.
And how about your name? What does Sherrill make you taste?
Sherrill makes me taste cherry jelly.
Cherry jelly?
No,
Like,
cherry.
oh, cherry. the
Cherry
fruit.
jelly.
Okay.
Yeah, cherry jam or cherry jelly. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty pleasant.
Yeah, that's very pleasant. I have a sister, Carolyn, and her name makes me taste popcorn.
Wow.
So it's, you know, it's just, and my mother's name was Margaret, and her name made me taste brown sugar. So, you know, but they're not all that pleasant.
No,
Some
that's
of them are really bad.
amazing.
It's like,
Wow.
let's get on to a different name, you know,
Right.
sometimes. Anyway.
Well, let's get a little more into your actual series. I love the location of the series, Botanic Hill. And I wonder, is that based on a real place that you know about, or is it just completely made up?
It's based on where I live. I live in the area of San Diego called North Park. It's a neighborhood that was started over 100 years ago. And I also I'm kind of surrounded by historic neighborhoods. There's another area called Bankers Hill, which is a little west of me. And that's the one that has a lot of these street names, but we have some of them here in North Park because the streets go all the way through west to east. And, you know, we have a Nutmeg Street here. We have a Palm Street. Some of the street names, like instead of Laurel Street, which is one of the streets we have here, I renamed it to Lotus Street because it sounds more exotic. I wanted to make it more exotic. And we have a Maple Street, but I renamed it Macadamia Street because it sounds more tropical. So, you know, that's what I did. And in my first book, I have a map. Actually, see if I can hold this up, if it's visible here. See if I can do it. I have a map that a graphic artist did for me of Botanic Hill, and all the street names are listed right here, right down here. So it's in book one. If you have book one, which is Nutmeg Street, Egyptian Secrets, the actual map and the list of all the 26 streets, A to Z, literally A to Z, are listed there.
Wow.
And so that's why I have to write 26 books because I have to work. My goal is to write one for each street.
Wow. Well, that's very clever.
Yeah, thank you.
Another mystery writer that did that A to Z thing, whose name is
that was Susan. oh gosh, her name just went out of my head. She just passed away a year or two ago, and she got all the way through Y before she passed. But anyway, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So you have a ways to go then, because you're on book 4, right?
I'm number 5 is kind of coming into my head. Number 4 is coming out this October. So
wow.
Yeah, so I have a ways to go.
So these street names, does each name relate to something within your book, or is it just kind of a way to have a starting point?
It's how the books get launched. I just randomly pick a street name, and I'll tell you why I chose Nutmeg Street in a minute as my first one. I just randomly pick a name off of the list of my 26, and then I put a colon. So that's like the title, the street name, and then a colon. And then I have a 2-word little descriptor that usually has some kind of like I call it a spooky word, like secrets or curse or phantom or danger or something like that. There's always a kind of a provocative word in the subtitle. But the books always start on that street. So that chapter 1 is always called Invitation on Nutmeg Street or Eucalyptus Street or Walnut Street, etc. And so the children are at that a home or a business or wherever it is on that particular street. And then they either encounter a mystery or they're invited, they're told about a mystery and kind of brought there on purpose because the person wants to hire them to solve the mystery. So that's where that comes from.
Oh, great. Yeah. And I know in the one book that I read, I was pleasantly surprised that someone actually hired the children detectives to solve something for them, which I don't think I've seen that anywhere in detective series. Usually they're solving little things around the neighborhood, or like Nancy Drew often did.
Well, that was that was sort of from Nancy Drew as well, because in chapter 1 of every Nancy Drew book, she either stumbles upon a mystery, but then there's always somebody to talk to about it. And then they say, I'd really like you to try to help me with this, and so she's basically hired at that point to solve the mystery. And then within that chapter, she'll use the narrator will mention, Nancy just finished solving the case of the, whatever, and so that's where I got my idea to, number 1, have the kids hired, and second was to say which one they just got done solving. So I put that in my first chapters as well.
Yeah, I really love that whole invitation and then someone kind of hiring them. That was really wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you find one of the things again, I've only read one book, I apologize, but
a lot of books out there.
I was really surprised by the amount of research you do, for the book. And I imagine for the other ones that I haven't read that's the same case. And as an adult, I actually learned some things because it was a historical piece. Do you find that children really love learning these intricate details along the way?
I do. My 5th graders that I had those last 10 years were really loved history. And I had some eyewitness, they're called eyewitness books. They're sort of large picture books that I had in my class library. I could not keep any of the historical ones on the shelf. They were always, I used to say, who's got the World War II book right now? I always have to ask, who's got this? The kids were fascinated by history, and especially history that they hadn't learned yet, like World War II, they hadn't learned that yet. And they were always asking me about World War II. And so I decided for my book 4, I was going to write about Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese internment camps. So all of that is meshed into the mystery of book 4, my one that's coming out this October. And my birthday's Pearl Harbor Day, by the way. So
oh my gosh.
I put something, that was another little piece of attachment that I had to that topic. that goes way back, of course, to my childhood when people would say, "Oh, you're a Pearl Harbor baby," and I'm like, "What's that mean?" And so over time, I learned about those things, and I wanted kids to, I'm once a teacher, always a teacher. That's part of the answer to your question too. Is I just kind of always feel like I want to impart something to kids that they might not get otherwise. So like in book 2, Eucalyptus Street, Green Curse, I talk a little bit about old Hollywood because I love the old Hollywood movies. And so there's a little aspect of that in the story too, so that's where that comes from. And my 5th one is going to have some elements of, I'm not going to say who yet, but a famous American author from the 19th century. I'm going to have some elements. I'm going to wrap a mystery around that particular writer.
Oh, great. Well, I know when I was a child, anytime I could learn something that no one else knew was like really special. And I suspect that every one of your books, you can learn something that most other people don't know. So you can even impress your parents.
Well, yeah, I've had some adults say, I really love your books too, because I learned from them. And then my child and I can have a conversation about it. And so, well, that's exactly what I want,
Wow. How perfect.
That warms my heart when I hear things like that.
So could you just tell us a little bit about the primary characters? There's a group of them. I think it's 4, but I'm not sure. Kind of what are their backgrounds? How did they meet and become friends?
All right. Well, I have 4 detectives, 2 girls and 2 boys, kind of a la Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys kind of thing. And Lexi and Lanny are twin brother and sister, and they live on Quinn Street. And right behind them, literally sharing a fence from around the block on Palm Street, is Moki. And Moki Kalani moved to Las Palmitas, California, when he was 8 from Hawaii. And then there's a character named Rani Kumar, and she's from India, and she moved to Las Palmitas when she was 5. And Lexi and Ronnie are best friends, and Moki and Lanny are best friends. So it didn't take the 4 of them long, of course, to partner up. And they became detectives accidentally because when they were in Paris, France, on vacation with the twins' parents a few years prior, they were walking by a jewelry store and outcharged 2 thieves who had just stolen a bunch of diamond bracelets, and they slammed right into the kids, and the diamonds, of course, scattered all over the street. And the crowds came, and the kids and some of the members of the crowd held the thieves down while the police were called. And so the news kind of went viral, of course. And so when the kids came back to California, they were famous. And so that's how the neighbors found out that they were able to help the police. And so that's why they started getting hired by their neighbors at that point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they're all 13 years old, and they will be 13 years old forever, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Just like Nancy Drew will be 18 forever. They will be 13 forever. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So
yeah,
26
cool.
books happen in 1 year.
That's right. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
Oh, so something that struck me while reading the book that I did was how polite your characters are. And I know you made a comment earlier about how you want them to be role models. And I found it unusual because it seems that so many people portray children as, some of them kind of talk back, or they throw tantrums, or they get in trouble. Part of the story is them having to learn to be more polite. So can you just talk about why you chose that and how polite they are?
Well, of course, I wanted role model characters, so they weren't going to be little hooligans by any means. But I modeled them after my students. I had every kind of student there was. I had hooligans all the way up to these like little polite kids that could probably write, etiquette books. And that last year of teaching, one afternoon, I was sitting at my back table, and I always had a few kids stay after school who were just like, their friends would come and they just play around in the room or help clean up the room or whatever. And I was watching them one day and I realized how polite they were to each other, how much they really cared about each other as friends and as classmates. These were kids who were willing to do anything to help their classmates. It was like we were a big family. And I remember just watching them one afternoon thinking, I wish all kids could be like this. Maybe it takes role models for kids to embrace their inner kindness or to discover that being kind is going to get you a long way in the world. And so I decided that that was why I wanted to bring that out in my 4 characters. And believe me, I've gotten slammed by that by some reviewers. I don't know any kids like this, and I think how sad that you don't know any kids like this.
Yeah.
Because I knew a lot of kids like that. That's why I say kids rock. I knew a lot of kids like that who could teach adults a few things about being polite and respectful. And so that's why I chose that aspect for my characters.
Well, I think it's wonderful, actually. I found it really refreshing, and I have known some kids like that. I've known the
That's good.
hooligans too. Some of them
Yeah.
are
Oh yeah.
my cousins.
But so adults too, right?
Right, sure, exactly. But yeah, but I think that's part of, and it also gives kids who are like that, a bit of rock star
Yeah.
notoriety, I think,
can.
which is really cool
If
because
they have enough confidence in themselves,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
then they discover pretty soon that, hey, instead of being teased, they're looked up to. So that's what I'm
Exactly.
trying to do with my characters. I'm trying to get the kids to think, oh, this can be cool to act like that. So
Love it.
thank you.
So I ask every author on the program this because we do have a lot of authors who watch.
Mhm.
And so can you talk about your writing process?
Oh
Are you
yeah.
pantser or plotter or something in between?
Mostly a pantser. Mostly. I started out with book 1 trying to outline, and I soon discovered that the outline became a mess. I was pulling things out, I was rearranging, and it was frustrating me more than anything. So now what I do is I come up with the kind of kernel of the idea of the mystery. I'm often not sure how it's going to end when I first start to write. I allow for the creative process to take over. I also allow for my detectives to tell me what to write. And that might sound strange, but when I'm actually in the zone writing the story, I feel like I kind of leave the planet and I enter their world. And I feel like I'm sort of a bug on the wall listening to their conversation. And I'm just like the scribe and I'm just writing it down. And I find that absolutely thrilling. And sometimes I'm not sure how the chapter is going to end. And then suddenly it just kind of ends. It's like, oh, that's really cool. I like how they ended that. I give them credit for it, So at the beginning, I come up with the kernel of the idea. And then I try to come up with, I stop and I think about what are some escapades that they could get involved in? And what are some clues that I want to bring out to lead them to this magic end of this mystery, which I'm not sure what it is yet. Then I try to come up with 20 chapter titles. And not everybody uses chapter titles, but I found as a teacher, and I noticed my students too, liked it when there were chapter titles because it made it an easy place to refer to in a book. Teachers say, oh, that chapter, 10 number, entitled so-and-so, and the kids would know. They could go right to it because of the chapter title. And it also is a hook for kids. A chapter title can be a hook. Like, oh, I want to read this next one. And then, I want to read the next one, read the next one. But anyway, so I come up with like 20 chapter titles, and those get moved around, and some get deleted, some others get, put in instead. But that's what helps me get through a book. So that's more pantser than plotter, I'd say.
So I understand all the pantser part because that's kind of how I work, but it's at what point, because you said you kind of get them started
Uh-huh.
But at what point do you then start doing the chapter titles and all of that? Is that, like after a couple chapters, or is that more in the beginning?
That's more in the beginning.
Okay.
Like I said, I just basically think of what's some clean, fun mischief they could get into that could lead them to a clue, or it's a clue that they want to try to resolve, and then that clue takes them somewhere. It gives them a destination. So
Okay.
that's kind of the way I work it, and that helps me. I'm a visualizer. So that helps me visualize what's going on, and that's where I can get my chapter titles and my escapades from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of have an idea. You don't outline it all, but you have an idea of what the escapades are going to be, and the titles reflect
Yeah.
that. So you do know
Yeah.
where you're moving forward. Do you ever get to a point where you say, well, the title for number 4, that's not going to happen now and have to change?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And if I had it down like in a big major long outline, like I did for my first book, and then I was starting crossing out or writing arrows. I mean, literally on a piece of paper, I was writing arrows and stuff. It's like that frustrated me. I thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to do more of the pantser thing, where I'm just going to try to put like my outline now is just my chapter titles. And if an idea comes to me, I might write a little note off to the side of that on that piece of paper. But I don't really plot things out too much anymore. I just find that for my creative process, that doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, because I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm probably a little more involved in that. I usually am the protagonist in the story. And
Yes.
so I'm kind of feeling what she's feeling and doing what she's doing. And so
Yeah.
I'm more connected than being a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
But you have so much amazing information that
Oh, thank
I
you.
can see how that fly on the wall thing is a better way to approach it.
I just want to mention, I do the research. I'm really adamant about doing the research because I don't want to pass off information that isn't true to kids.
Oh, that's
So,
really, very important.
Yeah, very important, I think, for kids to make sure what you're saying is true.
So you did talk about that you actually plan a total of 26 of these, which is quite a bit. Have you thought about or even played with the idea of writing a different series, or do you kind of think, well, this is, the rest of my life here?
This is literally the rest of my life. I'm really involved in these characters and in these stories, and I think that's where I'm going to stay.
Well, it makes sense. If I had to write 26 books in a series, it would be the rest of my life as well.
Yeah, some people really do 3, 4, or 5, and then they're on to a new one. But this is going to last a while.
Well, I think it's wonderful.
Hopefully. Thank you.
So we're kind of getting towards the end of our time together. Can you talk about if you have any events coming up where you're going to be in person, and particularly if any of my listeners live near you, they may want to meet you, but and then any virtual events that you may do.
Okay. Well, I've done a few book festivals already, but I really enjoy doing school visits, and I have one coming up in September in about 3 weeks right here in San Diego, a couple miles from my house, which is great. It's an in-person one. We didn't get to do too many of those the last few years, but I also do virtual class visits. And if anyone wants to sign me up, you can go to my website, sherrilljoseph.com/school-visits. And there's information there and the little contact button. And if you're in San Diego, we could probably arrange an in-person thing. Anywhere else, we probably could just do it virtually. I've done virtual events in Michigan and New York and Washington, D.C. and, places like that. So it's really fun. So we're not limited anymore by that. And I do these for free, by the way, because I don't believe in charging teachers. As I mentioned, I used to be one, and I used to put a lot of my own money back into my classroom every year. And even if there's a PTA and they give you money, it's like, I'd rather the teachers spend that little bit of money they might get on their classroom and their children and what their kids need, not to me. And so that's what I do. And so my reward is just meeting kids.
Well, I think that's very generous of you, and I'm sure
Thank you.
a lot of teachers will thank you for that.
Well, to me, it's the only way to go. It just makes the most sense to me to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said that you have your fourth book is coming out in October.
Mhm.
Do you have a big launch plan for that, or something that listeners should know about, like any special deals or anything like that?
I believe on Cozy Mystery Village, I'm going to have something around that time. I'm not sure how many of them are actually connected into social media, that can be readily available right now. I have a newsletter. If people want to subscribe to my newsletter, which is sherrilljoseph.com/newsletter, I always put my information in there as to where I'm going to be. I have a news section as well as an events section. I usually put it in the events section. You could go to my website, sherrilljoseph.com/events. It's there as well. So I would try to post things in advance so readers know where I am, can tune in.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Sherrill. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. As always, I will put all of Sherrill's contact information for her website, social media in the show notes associated with this. Her website is easy to remember. It is sherrilljoseph.com. This has been Dust Jackets, Conversation with Authors. See you next time.